But I'm Bev Lutz. I am a co-founder and board member and faculty member of our Center in Coaching and Organizations Executive Coach Training Program. And I am the delighted sort of host of today's Growth Rings with Niels Gott. For many of you, you already know this, but CCO is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And we were founded by a group of experienced executive coaches and organizational leaders to really, in the mission, unleash human potential by inspiring people to find their voice, by supporting leaders to shift their mindsets so they can solve big, complex, messy problems, but with grace and dignity and clarity and resilience. And we also are very much about expanding the reach of coaching and coaching education to underrepresented populations. And we're excited because our cohort that's kicking off this fall, ECHO Cohort 8, has more diversity in it, organizational types and leadership types than ever before. And we're very excited about that. But one way we also expand access is through these Growth Rings learning events. You can find Growth Rings and any other CCO offering on our events page of our website. And usually you'll find a Zoom link there too. Our next Growth Rings is September 15th, same time, same Zoom link. Another way we expand the reach of coaching is, as I mentioned, through the ECHO program. And though its formal name is Executive Coaching in Organizations, we also like to call it Everyone Coaching in Organizations and even Empowering Coaching in Organizations, because coaching is a profession, but it's also a skill set, and a very powerful skill set. And it's also a way of being in culture with people. So if you haven't attended an ECHO open house and you want to learn more, those are on our website also. The next one is next Tuesday, the 26th at 5 p.m. Central. We answer questions. We have great chats. It's just fun to hang out if you want to come. But today, what I'm excited about is introducing you to our convener, our speaker, our facilitator, our amazing Niels Gott. I can tell you all of the normal stuff, and there is normal stuff we say, like he's a positive psychology consultant and coach. He's an experienced agilist for places like 3M and Medtronic. He's a certified Scrum Master. He holds an MBA and a certificate in applied positive psychology from the world-renowned Flourishing Center. He's a graduate of an ICF accredited executive coaching and organizations program. He's a CCO founding partner. He is one of our favorite MCs of all time for our CCO annual global summit. He's a retired military officer invested in making the lives of active service and military vets better. Well, actually, I think one of the things I love about Niels is he's actually invested in making everyone's lives better. He's the CAO of Awesomer Coaching and Consulting. And I'm curious, does anybody know what CAO is? You might think Chief Administrative Officer. Chief Awesome Officer. And honestly, we can kind of chuckle about that, but there's a deep truth in this. Niels has perhaps one of the biggest hearts of possibly any human I know. And one of the things I love about him is he feels his feelings deeply, but they don't stop him. He uses them as fuel. And it's powerful. He uses them to be fuel, to be a great father and husband, to be a great friend, to be a great coach, a colleague, a collaborator, an ally, an advocate, and also forever learning and making this grand, glorious world a safer and more hopeful and even more awesome place. And today, Niels is inviting us into an exploration of awe. So please welcome Niels.
All right, Niels.
Wow, thank you, Bev. That was an incredible introduction. I'm humbled and honored, and I really appreciate how thorough that was. And my heart is truly touched. I'm feeling a lot of feelings right now hearing that. Thank you so much. That was very, very generous and very kind. Well, let me share my desktop and get my slide deck up for the things that I've got to share with you today. Let's make sure that this is all going in the right direction. Can you all see my screen now? Perfect. Well, thank you again, Bev, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. As Bev mentioned, I am a positive psychology consultant and coach. I forgot all of the other things that she enumerated, so that's part of why I'm even more humbled and honored. But I am a coach with Silicon Valley Change, and I'm also a leadership coach and facilitator with Raise the Bar. But I think one of the things that I am most proud of is getting to be part of this community because it's so rich and so full of incredible humans like Bev that are able to provide such generous introductions at a moment's notice. The reason why I want to explore awe with you today is there's several reasons, but I'm fascinated by the research. And so there's a few things that I want to share with you as we get into the material today. But I do want to pause and just point out that even though I am a coach, and I've put coach in the subtitle here, for anyone that's not a coach, I don't want that to scare you away because just as Bev mentioned, I think that skill set is important in just about any area of our life. And so being present is really kind of the goal. And we'll get to that as we explore awe and get into the material. So with that said, let's start with some definitions. Back in 2003, Dacher Keltner and Jonathan Haidt got together and wrote a paper that they titled Approaching Awe, a Moral, Spiritual, and Aesthetic Emotion. And this paper is often referenced in the research. This is what a lot of people look to as one of the best definitions. In that paper, they pointed out that awe really has two distinguishing features, that it comes with perceptual vastness, and that it also puts us in a position where we need to alter our assumptions about the world, events, people, nature, or perhaps even, believe it or not, God. And that's what's incredible about awe. The other thing to keep in mind is that while awe, and at least in the context that we're going to explore today, it's a positive emotion, it is closely related to wonder, perhaps even happiness. The biggest distinction between awe and wonder is that wonder invites us to figure things out. There's a curiosity that comes with wonder, and we're often next trying to untangle something and really figure out its inner workings. Awe isn't as much about that curiosity side of it, but they can be closely related. Awe is much more of an emotional response to that vastness, to that stimuli, and it can be overwhelming, and it'll overwhelm our current mental structures. But the other thing that's really cool about it is that it's really a form of mindfulness. And so this is a characteristic that humans have all around the world. All cultures create and honor spaces that are awe-inspiring. So that's another piece that I find really fascinating about it. To pull out the book definition, this is a pretty typical definition you'll see in a dictionary. Again, getting to that overwhelming feeling, reverence, admiration. What was interesting to me is that it actually has its roots in fear. The word itself comes from Old Norse or even Old English. In Old Norse, it's agi, or in English, it was eggi. And those words were more closely translated as terror or perhaps even uproar. I think that's the Norse definition, the terror or uproar. And I think that gets back to the sense of not being able to comprehend something that we're observing. Fast forward to our comfortable lives today, and it's much more a positive emotion, but it has its roots in things that are really overwhelming. And so I found that really fascinating. But that leads to an interesting paradox as well, that the word awful doesn't just sound like awesome. It actually has its roots in being too full of awe. That was an emotion, a state that was just overwhelming for people. Again, in our comfortable lives today, awesome is a much more positive emotion. It can be negative, but today I'm interested in the positive side of it. And the reason why is because there's a lot of benefits that come from feeling awe and experiencing awe. It's a largely nuanced and complex emotion, but it can trigger our parasympathetic nervous system, inducing feelings of calm and decreasing heart rate. You see here that it's linked to optimism, compassion, pro-social behavior, and even perhaps spirituality due to its promotion of connectedness. And it could be a pathway to the interconnected self because it helps us change our own self-perception. And it enables us to see ourselves as a small piece of a larger whole. You might hear things like, I felt small or insignificant. I felt the presence of something greater than myself, or I felt closely connected to the world around me. Another fascinating part of the benefits is that it's a strong predictor of lower levels of inflammation. There's studies that show that experiencing awe promotes our pro-inflammatory cytokines. I am no chemist and I don't pretend to have a strong medical background, but what I understand from cytokines are that it's a broad category of small proteins that are important in cell signaling. And so these cytokines are important in our immune system. And when we experience more awe, they help to reduce inflammation. And again, get back to that lowered heart rate. There's a couple other studies that get into that research that I can share if anyone's interested in that part after the fact. The first thing I'd like to do, though, is get into a breakout. And I tried to set these up, Chris, but I don't know if I did this the best way. What I want to invite us to do is to get into pairs. We've got a smaller group. I think 8 is what I see right now. So we're going to get into some discussion. And what I want to do is I'm going to put this link in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second so I can do that. If you haven't heard of Greg Lavoie, he's got this awesome site that he calls the Wow page. And I'll just show you real quick why it's called the Wow page. If you haven't already hit the link, he's got some just incredible images. Pull this to the right monitor. There we go. And so what we're going to do in this breakout in pairs is we're going to savor some of these fascinating images. So this one is in Iceland, for example, and it's just the setting sun reflecting through that glacier. There's about 160, I think 167 images he's got on the site. While we don't have time to go through them all, we'll savor a few of them. I've crawled down the rabbit hole once or twice where I just wanted to flip through all of these and consume them all. But as we get into pairs, what I'm going to invite you to do, and we're going to split up the pictures so we're not all starting with the same one, but I'm going to give you a group of pictures to look at. And I'd like you to just sit with it for a moment. Many of these really catch your attention right off the bat, as you can see. But as you sit there longer and savor it, I'm curious what else shows up and what else you're able to notice. So I'm going to stop sharing again, and let's get ourselves organized. For breakout rooms, we've got 1, 2.
I think by default, Niels, if you're creating the breakout rooms, it won't assign you to one. So with 8 of us, well, now there's 9, but with 8 or 9 of us, if you do 4 breakout rooms, and click the box for include co-hosts.
Okay, let's do
and then
that.
You may need to hop into a room.
Okay. I might split some people up here real quick, if you'll bear with me. I'm doing this on the fly. We've got 9, we've got a slightly odd number. So one group will have 3. Okay. So for room 1, I'd like you to just scroll down to the 3rd row and start with that picture. And again, the idea is to not be in a hurry here. Open up, if someone's able to share their screen so they're all looking at the same one at the same time, that would be helpful. I'll leave it to you all to figure out who's got the chops to share screen. Do we have that permission, Chris, that everybody can share screen in breakouts? I hope.
Yeah, the Zoom meeting should allow that just fine.
Perfect. So room 1, you'll start with the 3rd row. Room 2, you'll scroll down to the 6th row. And room 3, you'll scroll down to the 9th row. And then just pop up that first picture. And I'd like you to just savor it for a moment. But then I'd like you to also notice what's showing up for you. And that's part of the discussion you'll have in your small group. What you observe, what you're experiencing, what questions you have, and be really present to that experience. And then we'll come back together and debrief as a group. Does that make sense what I'm asking you all to do?
And
Yeah, I don't know what room I'm in.
You're about to find out.
Oh, okay.
So, all right, the rooms should be open. Welcome back.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm really curious how that went. I'd like to know what you observed, what shifted, what you're present to from working through those pictures.
Well, I know I had different reactions to different ones than I had when you said only one more minute. I wanted to click, click, click and see a whole bunch more. So we did click another one and we both sort of sat there and Pete went, well, what do you feel on this one? And I was like, overwhelmed, because it was a aerial view of a district in Barcelona that initially I was like, I just wanted to almost get away from it because it seems so hectic, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pete, I was telling him about my reaction to the last image we looked at, that district view in Barcelona.
Yeah. It's pretty busy.
Had one like that as well. I was with Cynthia and Jennifer, and they did a great job. I learned one thing, which is they think at a much higher level than I do when they're it's like, wow, everything's relative. So you got some big brains on your team there. But going back to what Niels was saying, you know, the relationship between awesome and awful. We talked about that just a little bit because some of them were really awesome. And I found myself, I looked at myself like my mouth was hanging open as I kind of just stared at it. And you get this sort of peaceful, comfortable, relaxed, awe-inspiring, whatever you want to call it, feeling. And you just, it's great. And then the other ones, we had a couple. One in particular was like, we used words like anxiety and fear. And while, you know, you actually wanted to move on at one point, I said, I'd rather just kind of move on. Let's see if something else that's more on the awesome side rather than the awful side. So there's obviously a natural desire to move to the awe-inspiring on the positive sense versus the negative. But I found, you know, for me, at least first time doing an exercise like this, it was maybe analogous to an exercise before, like laughing. If you laugh and what laughter does to sort of stimulate the brain and get you into a different spot with like your endorphins. It had some of those same feelings, right? It makes you feel good. It was neat exercise.
I really appreciate that reflection, Dan, and you're totally onto something with this similarity in the brain. Laughter also triggers our parasympathetic autonomic nervous system, and so I've got another handout. I don't know if it'll be appropriate today that talks about dose, but dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and I've already forgotten the E.
Epinephrine.
I think you're right on. Yes, thank you, Kurt. So, but to your
Dr.
point,
Kurt.
it's all that same function in the brain, and they are closely related. I think that's a fantastic reflection. Appreciate that. Well, how about room 2? Anything show up for you guys? So what are you present to? What shifted?
Couple of observations for me. One is each of us had a different reaction to each of the pictures. We were kind of all, it was just different for each, different experience for each one of us. Another observation is, you know, you kind of connected the word awe to calm in your introductory remarks, or at least one of the descriptors of awe. And one of the pictures did just the opposite for me. It was anything but calm. It was adrenaline rush, the guy that was breaking the sound barrier, diving from space, crazy. I didn't find that calming at all. But,
Felix Baumgartner, when he jumped from the edge of space. Yeah, I love that one. I love that whole thing. It's
cool.
What I noticed was I kind of rushed to get here late and just moving into an exercise where I needed to sit still and look at things and interpret my reaction. Really, I could tell like I calmed down.
Mhm.
And so I noticed that.
Fantastic. Which is, after all, kind of the point. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Let's, I've got a few more slides to show you. Let's jump back right in. Get the share going again. Are you seeing my desktop?
Yep.
There we go. So let's talk about when we do experience awe. Obviously, looking at pictures like that can get us there, but the research shows that there's a few other avenues. The thing about awe is that we can't force it into being. There are things we can do to make ourselves more available and more open to experiencing awe, this activity being one of those things. But beyond that, here's some tips, or at least some pathways that the research shows are options for us. Taking the scenic route. What I love about this idea is I'm sure we've all heard of the idea of, we'll just use driving to work as an example. I mean, certainly pre-pandemic, but when there's a place that you go to on a regular basis, your brain goes into autopilot. And it's designed to do that, to protect us, where those pathways become habits so that we don't have to think about it. But what also happens then is, while we're driving that same route every day, we're not aware of everything else that's going on. So taking the scenic route breaks us out of that same rhythm and that same habit. And so novelty is available to us. Things that we might not have seen otherwise are available to us. In fact, this is kind of random, but I'm thinking about Casey years ago. Well, it feels like years ago now. I think at the start of the pandemic, I think we were in Jenny's Joy Seekers together. And I feel like you were sharing a story of being out for a walk in the morning with your dog. I feel like it was around a little body of water. I don't remember exactly for sure, but I remember you describing coming upon something that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. And as I remember how you shared it, that gave you some joy. And that was part of what we're doing as a community. But being in that scenic route is what makes things like that possible. Being in a crowd is another opportunity. I'm thinking about times when I've been in a military formation. I remember being on a brigade run, and not to bore you with what military units are like, but a company is the smallest unit, about 100 some odd soldiers. A battalion can be a few hundred soldiers. A brigade can be many thousands of soldiers. And so being in a brigade run was just an incredible awe-inducing experience for me. But if you're at a large concert or in a large parade, these same kinds of things can become available. Just getting outside. Bev alluded to this at the outset. This is one of my favorites, just being in nature. I'm actually listening to a book right now, The Comfort Crisis, and it's all about how we live very comfortable lives. At least certainly I do, white dude here in the upper Midwest. And when we can get ourselves outside and in nature, we can actually make ourselves more resilient, especially when we're getting out of that comfort zone. I love going to the boundary waters. Those of you that know me already know that about me. And that's part of it, is that it's getting out of my comfort zone and it's getting somewhere just incredibly beautiful. It's very awe-inspiring for me, for sure. Turning your gaze upward, quite literally, can be awe-inducing. When you think about trying to see the Milky Way, if you're lucky enough to be outside of the light pollution of a big metropolitan area, or even just seeing a lunar eclipse or some of the fascinating things that happen with celestial bodies, that again introduces that sense of scale that can be very awe-inspiring. Getting inspired, which seems like a no-brainer, but I'm thinking about people that do incredible things. Even Simone Biles, I think, comes to mind, or Malala Yousafzai, when she stood up to the Taliban. People that are really strong in their convictions and their principles. I get a lot of inspiration for that. Of course, your mileage may vary, but seeing people that do incredible things can be an awe-inducing experience. Seeing a phenomenal performance. I love seeing music. I feel like I haven't done that in forever. I can't tell time in the pandemic anyway. But seeing someone that is incredibly talented at music, doesn't necessarily have to be music, any kind of performance can be awe-inspiring. I found myself clicking down the YouTube rabbit hole over the weekend. For some reason, YouTube was suggesting to me America's Got Talent videos. And those can just be a ton of fun to watch when you see people that have these just amazing skills showing those off for a crowd. There's this guy called Tape Face that just has a piece of duct tape across his mouth, and he's just communicates with his eyes. but he does these incredible things. And I guess for me, that was very awe-inspiring. So these are some of the pathways that are available to us. What I'd like to do is go back into a breakout for a few minutes again. And here's where we're going to share some stories, because this is another opportunity for us to both remember awe. And the way our brains work is when we are remembering an experience, those same emotions happen in our body. And so I'm curious what happens when we share a story with another partner or with other folks in a breakout. And the key to this, of course, is to describe that experience in as much sensory detail as you can recall. What did you smell? What did you hear? What was the temperature? When you can tune into those senses, helps to bring the experience more alive. But I'd like you to pause for a moment and think about a time that you felt awe. And then we'll have a chance to share that once we open up the breakouts again. We've got about 3 folks per breakout, and I'm just doing a quick time check. I had originally planned that this would be about a 15-minute activity. I want to make sure that's still okay with everyone. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so I actually can see. If everyone has 5 minutes to share a story, give or take, then we have a chance to come back as a group and debrief. So we'll open the breakouts. Think of a time that you felt awe. It doesn't have to be a hard 5 minutes, but take about 5 minutes, give or take, to share that experience. And then we'll come. Well, with us little merry band of warriors, I'm curious how that was for you all that I didn't get to spend time with. What did you learn? How was that experience?
Well, a good learning experience, right? At least for me. I mean, I don't know if you guys have been through some of these exercises like this before, but so great learning experience on a number of fronts. One is for all 3 of us, our awe-inspiring moments or experiences related to nature, which I thought was interesting, given what you said earlier, Niels, about the importance of nature and that. And not only was it nature, but then sort of the enormity of nature, right? The vastness of nature, the complexity of nature, and the perspective it gives you on your life, or that it could give you. I guess the other thing I learned is we talked about how we felt, and Cynthia did a nice job sort of asking these questions, facilitating, but like, what did you hear? There was a spectrum from people's sensory or hearing being more sensitive and picking up a lot of things to, I guess it was in Cynthia's case, blocked everything out and became silent, even though she was on a motorcycle, right? So you got the wind rushing past you and all sorts of noise factors, and yet that dissipated. So it's a very personal experience when you get to these awe-inspiring moments, and how your body reacts to it, and your brain and what it does and what it triggers is unpredictable. But enjoy it.
That's the key right there. I love it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dan, can I just say, it's so fucking fun to see you on this thing.
That's great to be on. I'm
Yeah.
glad you invited me and I carved out some time for it.
Awesome.
It's always a pleasure. I will say that. I don't participate in a lot of these events, and that's just on me. But when I do, I always find they're wonderful. You guys are putting together a great product. You've got a great purpose, obviously, and it's fun to watch it evolve and come with you from time to time and watch it evolve. It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Great to have you with us. Totally.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Well, I'll pile on the one thing that you said, Dan, that I think was true for Bev and I was the nature piece. We both told stories that were based in nature, and we both have a shared love of the Boundary Waters. And I think it's impossible to go up there and not feel some awe. It's such an incredible space. But I was also sharing a story with her of when I was in the UK training with the British Territorial Army, their version of the National Guard. And we got to go on this ridiculous ruck march. It wasn't even that long, but we're climbing this hill that just seemed to go forever. we've got 35 kilo packs on our backs, and I'm basically on all fours to get up the side of this, what it really was a small mountain, as it turns out, because when we got to the precipice, we were so high I could actually see the curvature of the earth. And I don't know how often I've actually done that with my feet on the ground. I mean, it's one thing to see it from a plane, but to be actually on solid ground and see that far into the horizon. But it gets back to that scale, being outside, all those things. Anything else to add before we go to the next little piece here?
Just an interesting observation that for our group too, the three of us, Chris, Carla, and I, there was also that nature theme that emerged in each of our three stories, which is nature and people and relationships, but nature.
Yeah, I had a bunch of nature things come up, but the thing that I spent more of my time on was telling Niels about a feral cat that I worked for months and months and months and years to befriend. And the evening she decided to hop into my lap. And I was like, I was so in awe that this very wise, smart animal who knew how to protect herself and live through, our seasons, would decide that she trusted me enough to do that. And just the awe that being trusted by a creature that I respected so much. It was just amazing. Yeah.
Right on.
And actually that kind of, Niels, I think you probably got a question for us and I might be jumping the gun. So I'm gonna let you ask the question.
Well,
you
now
want
I'm
me to
curious if
jump
we
the
are thinking
gun?
something. Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. So of course I'm going to think about what does this have to do with coaching and leadership and that sort of thing. And I really do think that I feel some of that awe, or I feel that awe some of the time when a client who has said, I didn't come willingly to coaching, or even I did come, but I wasn't sure what I was getting into, relaxes into that trust. And you are holding something that is precious here. Another human being is seeing you as a safe psychological space in which to explore things that are incredibly important to them. And I think that happens to us as coaches as well as leaders. And it never ceases to blow me away. And it's why I often tell coaches in training, prepare to fall in love with your clients.
Yeah.
Well said. And I can't remember if it was you or if it was Jenny, but it might have been both of you that I remember saying, one of you saying while we were in our coach training about how important that is to recognize that there's a life at stake here, and it's your client's life that you need to be able to honor and respect. And so I consider that an incredible privilege to get to be in that space, of course, but it's often very awe-inspiring for me. But that is, I mean, consider the gun jumped, but that is really where I wanted to go next, is how can this inform your coaching? How can this inform your leadership? I'm curious if there's any takeaways, what's present for you now with what we've done today, if there's anything that's still resonating with you, if there's anything that you're inspired to try. This is really where I'd like to see what we've got to go forward with.
So I'll build up on what you were saying. So it's the relationship with awe. So thinking of the story I shared of being on the dock, my relationship to the sunset was also a reflection back on me. So the relationship with our clients, with our team, in our leadership, in our coaching, it's being a part of others' success and in awe of their magic and where they're going, and also a reflection of my own humanity. And my often with clients, what I'm coaching on is stuff I'm working on too. And so the uniqueness of each one of us and the paradox of the human condition, that it's also the same.
Couldn't agree more. Love that.
Maybe from a different angle, only just from where I am right now. You know, maybe this is, I wouldn't say it informs my leadership, but I think about maybe from a practical standpoint of how I use it, right? So I'm, you know, fighting fires kind of every day here. We produce things and there's always issues. And actually just before this meeting, just prior to, I was in a production meeting where we're going through some things on scrap and how we can reduce scrap. And we have some outside people here helping us, and it doesn't really matter, but it's, you know, kind of getting into what can you do differently? And we weren't where we needed to solve anything in that meeting, but it was more about how we're going to frame it up and talk about next steps. But when you bring people together, you know, drag them out of the firefighting and you start talking, it's hard to shift and think about the possibilities. But I think about what this exercise did, and I'm just kind of like, wow, if you spent 15 minutes at the beginning of a meeting like that and said, let's do some awe-inspiring exercises, and then you moved into, call it brainstorming, and you get people to move from this, I just came off the plant floor and it's on fire, to how do I shift into this world to think about how we could do things differently? It's like, you know, passing through a gate and a time warp, and you come out the other side and now you're capable of thinking differently. And so I think it's a good tool to, you know, reset your brain and open up to new possibilities.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely love that. As a coach, I totally just wanted to applaud. That's right on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, let me pile onto that, Dan, because the, you know, leadership, that's your vantage point, and I share your passion for leadership. And I continue to explore what is leadership. And, you know, part of it is a question that arose when I was studying narrative coaching with David Drake. And the question I've been exploring there is, what if the leader's role, what if leadership is really just helping people step across a threshold, being guides at a point of change in their life as they step into whatever is awesome for them or awesome for the organization? What if we're simply guides to help them move from here to there in this world of possibility? And boy, this awesome kind of reflection exercise that we're doing here, just if as leaders we could just pause and create space for people to recognize and help guide them into those possibilities. That's what's coming up for me.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, and with all of what Jenny and Dan and Kurt said, another word that keeps coming up for me is when someone trusts me, when I feel that connection and part of a community, when I get to serve, because it really feels like a high level of service, to guide, convene, coach, whatever, I feel this enormous sense of gratitude about it. And if we could approach, whether it's coaching, leadership, parenting, being a friend, whatever, not as a duty, but as this incredible gift we get, this thing we're invited into doing. What's present when we apply kind of awe and the gratitude that often comes with awe?
I'm reminded, Bev, a little bit of, I've had many, many moments as a dad where like I look at my kid doing something and like just sit there and watch them for a little bit and get this like moment of awe. And I recognize I'm a lot more loving, caring parent in the moments that follow that than I maybe was beforehand. Like I recognize that like, you know, I'm not frustrated by the latest thing they're doing that's causing me a headache. I'm in a bit of awe about them, and I want to love and support and nurture that. And it puts me into a better mental spot than maybe I was in otherwise.
Yeah. Little miracle human that you've got around you. Okay?
I absolutely love that, Chris. Totally on the same page with you. They are little miracle humans, and Sometimes it's tough to be patient, I'll freely admit, but if I can remember the awe,
It doesn't last forever, but
it's fleeting. It's fleeting. There's something about the impermanence though, too, to be grateful for the moment. Well, just one other thing, Bev, I included this quote for you. I know that you wanted everyone to have these words of wisdom. It's maybe a bit long to read. It made me chuckle too. So anyway, I just want to thank you all for spending time today and investing in this space together. This has been incredible. And I really, it's been awesome for me, frankly. And I really appreciate how you've invested in our shared growth together. So I know all of you except for you, Dan, but it's been great to get to meet you today. So I feel like I know a little bit about you just in the time that we spent together. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate you engaging and being part of this topic.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Neil.
Niels, thank you.
We
Thank you.
always like to close out with a couple of our commercial messages that there is an Echo open house next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central. And there's another Growth Rings event on September 15th when we might very well be hearing from a group of joy seekers, which will be a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
But I also love having each person share something with Niels that they're taking away, something that's sticking with them from today. Who would like to start?
I'm going to seek some.
It goes back to the practicality of some of these things for me. Maybe when I'm doing it, I'm always like, how do I apply this in a way that's practical? And so I already gave you my example, which is how do I use like awe-inspiring moments with others to piggyback on where Kurt's going to help them move from A to B or move forward. I'm using it more for solutions based, but obviously you can use it for coaching and life experiences. So my takeaway is, while it can be really fulfilling and eye-opening and experiential for me, it can be even more powerful if you can help others move along that spectrum as well.
Right. Thanks, Dan. Jenny, it sounded like you had one.
So seeking awe and savoring the fleeting moment.
yeah, I think the same for me. Like trying to seek out those moments a little more actively, as opposed to maybe what I've been doing, which is having them come along in more of a passive way.
One thing that came up for me as I think about awe is the feeling I got when I saw two old friends on this in conjunction with my CCO community mates here. It was a moment of awe just to experience Dan and Pete on this call with all of you beautiful people that I'm in community with in the CCO space. Awesome moment.
Yeah.
Wonderful to see you again, Kurt.
What's that, Dan? I'm
I
said
said it was wonderful to see you again.
Oh, great to see you. Yeah, we're due for breakfast.
My hug.
Yeah.
This is great. This is great.
I drop off. Take care, everyone.
All right,
Appreciate your
Dan.
time.
Good
Thanks,
to see
Dan.
you.
Great meeting
Good
you.
to meet you, Dan.
Be well.
So I think, I'd echo what other people say. They're just what's possible if I have an intention to find awe every day.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Niels, my friend, thank you.
Thank you. I'm certainly taking away just how great it was to be with all of you, and that incredible introduction, Bev. That was certainly awe-inducing for me. That was I've already shared that with you how much how incredible that was, how much I appreciate that. But I'm taking away that opportunity to experience them all.
My pleasure. So this concludes our July 21st Growth Ring.